there are adequate documentation, etc. I see some challenges in implementation, honestly.
Thank you, Pramod. I think this is one area where I think a lot of discussion will happen and is happening in terms of how one, puts those, principles, policies in place, so that if tomorrow one needs to justify to the shareholders, it's possible to, at least say that bona fideness is proved from a company's perspective that they were wanting to do everything in the right way. So this is going to be a very important element, from that perspective. Just coming, Pramod, again from a CSR perspective and corporate social responsibility, why Chaitanya, carried us through, some of those aspects. What do you think from a practical point of view would, company have to do now? As Mr. Makhija was saying that most of the big companies would have some policies and, some aspects in place. So my big question is that if, let's say, somebody comes tomorrow to say, this is my NGO, please put the funds here. And that someone is an influential someone. How do you put policies and how have you started thinking on what policies you need? How do you beat that type of request from your perspective? Some thoughts if you have around that.
I think early days at this point of time, honestly, I'll start by echoing what Mr. Mirza had said right in the morning, that this is actually a 2% additional tax which you are going to be having to pay. Okay, nevertheless, I mean, leaving the conceptual issues behind, let's talk about the implementation. I had seen the first draft of the rules, which Mr. Vasani says that are fortunately in the process of a complete rewrite. That was exactly echoing the first concern that at least we had of around mission creep and the bureaucratic creep. I mean, the amount of disclosure, amount of intervention, the amount of project-wide articulation of the objectives, then going ahead and checking out what has been done, not done, etc. You required a CSR department in the organization if you were to meet the intent of the rules that were laid down. Fortunately, we hear that they are going to be rewritten. One of the things from the MNC perspective that we have is that many of our CSR programs are actually globally led. And therefore, while we have business in India, some of these are funded directly from the group. So obviously it straight away plays into the thing that some of those programs, rather than being funded by the group, will probably start funding locally itself, which may or may not be in the best interest of the country, but nevertheless, I mean, you would probably do that. And you're right, I mean, I think it is something that we will look at framing a policy and then seeing that what is the best practical way of implementing it. I mean, and we will try and find that there is a balance between practical implementation and at the same time making a difference. I think early days at this point of time, as I said.
Yeah, just I mean, just because you mentioned about group spending versus the company spending, Bharat, I just wanted to get your views on is there any thought that the government will welcome that if some spending is done at a group level, then the companies that are controlled by the group can spend that much lesser? Is there any thought on especially on CSR, because what they want is a certain spend? That is one. The second, and more difficult one is that you have a clutch of companies below, especially the Tata Group. You receive dividends from companies below, on which already CSR has been paid. Would that get exempt when you go to the holding company in terms of determining the profit? I mean, those are the two points from a CSR perspective which will become more critical from an India Inc. Point of view.
I think let me first clarify that while since I'm on the committee, I won't be able to share complete details, but everything still is at drafting stage. I think many people got worried seeing the draft rules which were they made it public to some members. It's completely at an embryonic stage. Let me tell you the suggestions made. First of all, there was a suggestion that international companies, a lot of these IT companies, whether TCS, Infosys, Wipro, they have a large chunk of their income coming from international operations. Now, they wanted to provide that if whatever expenditure which is incurred overseas will not be counted in computing this 2% limit. Then I said that the income also which is earned overseas should not be counted logically. Because if you are saying that if there's an earthquake in Chile and I paid millions of dollars, you won't count that as CSR, then obviously the income which I earned from Chile operations should also not be counted. So that's one point. Number two, which is we felt, and I think they also agreed, is that the scope of activities which is currently prescribed in Schedule 7 is very, very narrow. Companies are doing many better things, much larger things. Sustainability initiative, lot of stuff is there. And they have in principle agreed that they would perhaps replace this schedule. So that's second part. Third part, there is a very huge concern in the minds of the corporates that first of all, because of peer pressure or whatever you call it, they are required to spend 2% of average net profits. Let me clarify, for Tata Group, that's not a problem. For one of our companies, we are spending more than 4% already. And for all companies, we have done back of the envelope calculations, we are far ahead of the thing. But for many others, if it's a challenge, what they are proposing to, I think they are trying to soften the blow through rules. So they will try to kind of make a provision whereby a larger number of activities will be allowed. We also propose that if a company is small and it doesn't have the infrastructure, because I find something very dichotomous. 500 crores of net worth, it's a huge company. 1,000 crores of, but net profit is just 5 crores. I think there's an inconsistency in the threshold which is prescribed for the applicability itself. There's also a problem that they said that, many of the private companies meet the 5 crore net profit threshold and they don't need to appoint an independent directors, but the section says that if there has to be a one independent director, so those private companies are uncomfortable with that. So I think when the rules are finally notified, many of those aspects will get clarified. But some of the issues which we have flagged are these issues with regard to investment companies which have dividend flow coming from companies which are already subjected to CSR, and which does not have really any impact on the environment. Investment company just has a dividend income or income from capital gains. Now that is one aspect. Overseas income is second aspect. Broadening the scope is third aspect. But most importantly is that they have promised that after the bill is passed by Rajya Sabha and before the finance bill is enacted, that is the period between April and May, they are going to meet the finance minister to ensure that the suitable amendments are made in the Income Tax Act to harmonize provisions of the companies bill, not only with respect to CSR, but many provisions including M&A, to bring the Companies Act and the Income Tax Act in sync with each other. So that's going to happen. A list is getting prepared. As I told you, there are still early days, many things will happen. Have patience, because they also realize that there are a lot of things which they need to think through. So I would imagine that these issues will be taken care of.
Sorry, Pramod, just before, just one quick, this thing. Do you think the group concept will come for CSR or it will be individual company based?
I cannot predict at this stage because I am only one of the several members of the committee and my views will not be really relevant for entire team. So but ideally it should come. And in fact, in our case, as you know, we have another unique situation that our entire income eventually goes to charitable trusts, 66%, and they do entire income on the CSR. They spend the entire income on CSR. Now, there are many such things within it to think through because there are groups which are created in a very innovative way where we spend, I don't think anybody can claim that they spend larger than the Tata Group in terms of CSR activities. So we have nothing to worry about, but many of these practical difficulties needs to be threshed out. And I think the scope of activities should be aligned with what is the charitable purpose under Section 11 of the Income Tax Act. That would make it much better.
Yeah, Pramod.
In our case, for example, we have a global CSR program where we have tie-ups with WHO, UNICEF, etc. Therefore, the global TB program, leprosy program, and so on and so forth for really the health issues which are relevant to this part of the world. But the way it works is that you are not supposed to be intervening in the way while you make a contribution, you align on the purpose which you want to contribute towards, and you decide and you sort of agree what is the commitment you will make. However, how they will run the program is entirely left to the global organizations. And sometimes you don't even have visibility of how much is being spent on India. And India is a very large part of all these programs because these are tropical diseases. So some of those areas we will have some challenges around, getting some tough dialogues with the group also, that what is the group doing versus what we are going to do in India, and what are the legal responsibilities, what are the optics of that in the media, etc. So therefore some interesting times ahead, I guess.